Hi everyone, and welcome to my top 500 games. This is actually a list that I've made over a long period of time. I recently finalized it to the best of my ability, and so I'm going to be taking you through this list, one game at a time for the most part, and I am going to start off by just explaining the rules that I've set for myself with this. So I'm just going to start off by basically telling you that it's a list of my top 500 video games. That means that it has to be a game that you can play on a game console or a PC or on the internet, something that requires like an electronic form, if you know what I mean. And I have set some rules for games that I am not going to include, or how I'm going to include things, or how I'm going to distinguish between what counts as a game or whatever. Now, the first rule that I want to point out is that I am not including any game that is a mere duplication of a physical game. So anything that's established not as a video game, that something has just been replicated, then it's I can't count it. So say something like online chess or whatever, where you're just playing with other people and it's just a mere duplication and there's nothing added to it. I can't count that because that's just chess in video form. If of course there was like a strange version of chess that they worked on something and changed a few things round that makes it more than just playing with people chess as you would with a board, I would say that's legible. Second rule is that I'm not going to include collections. Well, collections are quite a tricky subject because sometimes you'll have collections. They come in two different forms. In one form, you'll have a collection where it has a collection of games that otherwise exist. So, say like on the new consoles, you may get a game which is the Genesis collection or something like that, or the Atari collection. Those aren't counted as games because those individual games count as individual games. But say if some random company makes a game which is a bunch of mini games one at a time, that's legible because those aren't individually distinguished games, which I understand the lines can be blurry when it comes to this. But collections, just general collections of games that exist over the past, not going to include them. I'm going to make one exception to this rule, and I know it's bad to make exceptions to rule, but I'm going to make one exception to this rule because there's one collection in particular where like if I didn't include it all together, I would have such a hard time ranking them, and I'll get into that when I actually get to that game. Yeah, my next rule is I'm not going to include duplications across systems, and this should be pretty obvious. So, say if one game comes out on the PS3 and it also comes out on the Xbox 360, I'm not going to count that as two separate games because it's the same game, but ported to different systems. Although if, say, something has the same name as a game, but it was released on a different system and it's different enough to count as a different game, then I will count it as a different game. So sometimes, for example, you might get a game that comes out on the PlayStation, and they also make a Game Boy Advance version, and obviously they're going to be different because the hardware is different. You can't duplicate the same game, so they are going to count as different games. Is there anything else to talk about duplicates across systems? Yeah, when it comes to like remakes and stuff, I'm going to sort of use my own discretion with that. So say if something comes out on one system, then it comes out on a newer system where they change a few things around, I'm generally just going to make that one game, count it as one entry rather than have it across multiple entries. My next rule is when it comes to multiple versions of a game, and I'm sure there are some obvious examples out there. But say if something comes out as like you've got a game that's released and there's like more than one version of it released, but they're purposely made with slight different alterations. I'm sure there's a few examples of that. I'm generally, if I think they're similar enough, I'm going to count them as one game. I'm not going to talk about the very, very minute differences as to why one of them is better than the other in that case. Again, I just have to use my own discretion when it comes to that. Extra content, when it comes to DLC and add-on packs and stuff like that, there's a question of would I include that? And I suppose I'd have to say that I would include it, but I would have to sort of like put it at a discount because it's like an additional product that you buy separately. Um, although not necessarily in all cases. So I think I will have to account for that as much as I can. But I mean, there might be games with DLC where I've really liked the game, but I've not played the DLC. I can't take the DLC into account. I just have to do it to the best of my abilities. Rule number 6, lack of experience. This is something that some of these rules are basically just describing what makes it difficult in making the list. Some games I have played, but I sort of lack experience to feel confident enough to really judge it properly, to be as objective as I can. Sometimes the lack of experience it's just naturally going to happen. It's going to make me rank a game lower. So say if there's a game where I haven't played it too much, but I really liked what I did play, there's going to be sort of a battle between like how much I liked it and how little I've played. So it's going to be quite hard to judge, but I'm just putting that out there so that you know. And equally, rule number 7, which is kind of along the same lines, is about nostalgia, because nostalgia is going to obviously play a big part in this. And this is a list of 500 games. I can't go back and play all these 500 games and be completely objective and say, yep, the mechanics of this particular game that I played in 1995 is at such a level. I have to work on my memory here, and so even though I think generally it's a good idea to be as objective as possible, and I'm trying to be as objective as possible, there's some things I just can't escape that. That's just going to be there. Another thing to point out is that I'm not necessarily going to always try to justify why I've put something in a particular position on the video. The reason for this is that I think this isn't so much a rule of what makes it on the list as so much a rule about the video series that's going to come from this. The main reason for this is that I think it's going to make the quality a lot worse if I'm stood around saying, yeah, well, this is good because it's got this, but oh, it's a bit bad because of this, and I try to justify as, oh, why is it higher than this game but lower than that game? It's going to be so awkward doing that. So in most cases, I am just going to just talk about what the game is and kind of just leave it at that and say, yep, this is my number so-and-so game, and talk about my experience with the game, and that's it. Clumps. Clumps is, I don't know if this is a word that people would use, but this is a word that I use to describe a certain thing in list making, which is quite apparent when you're making a list as big as this. But clumps are, what I would consider a clump is where you have a bunch of similar games all together on the list. So you may have like 4 games of the same series all together, and that could, I mean, I'm not saying it's not justified, but it can be so, because it's so much easier to compare games that are similar to each other, I suppose. It's really, really hard to really sort of separate that out. And sometimes when I've seen like top game lists, I think to myself that they've purposefully just separated things out as to like make it so that they don't look biased or something. Like I remember seeing like an IGN article where they'll have like one Madden game at number 20 and then another Madden game at number 90, and it feels so disingenuine, even though I'm not saying it is, but it seems that way. And I also think that if you have a bunch of games put together, like I did see like a list someone did of their top 400 games, and they had like 15 Zelda games all lumped together. And I'm aware of clumps, and I'm aware that they can actually happen, and I've not particularly tried to avoid them, so to speak, because you know you can't help how you feel about games. But yeah, I'm just being wary of it. I'm just basically putting it out there that I'm being wary of it. And what I will do sometimes is when I actually get to a clump, I will talk about the games. Sometimes I'll talk about them as a whole. I might say, okay, and now we've got a clump of 2 games or a clump of 3 games here. And so I will talk about them individually. I'll talk about them as a whole as opposed to individually. Another rule is that, and this should be completely understandable, and this is more so for my own sake to avoid any sort of controversy, even though it's a top games list. There's going to be people are going to complain about whatever, but I think it's important that I purposefully do not include Level Up Land in this list. The reason being is that Level Up Land is a game that I made, and I spent a couple of years working on it as well. So there's an obvious bias there that I can't escape. There's nothing I can do to escape my liking of the game to my sentimental value of the fact that I made it. And if no matter where I put it on this list, even if I put it at number 499, there's going to be someone that says that, well, you can't say it's better than the game you put at number 500 because it's your game. It's not fair. And even if I did put it at like number 500, that wouldn't be genuine. It wouldn't. I would purposefully be trying to put it in a place to avoid controversy. So I'd mess up the list. So I think that the best thing I can do in this regards, and the best way that I can be as honest as possible when it comes to this, is just not include it in the list, right? So Level Up Land is exempt from this list, and I think that's understandable. What else is there to talk about? There is one thing that there is to talk about is just the fact that it's so hard making this list. I've gone through so many different iterations and I've gone through so many different processes. I may actually end up making a video about the way that I actually went through this list. But I mean, you can have a rank of 100 or 500 games in this case, and then just look at one of them and think that's completely out of place, and then you'll nudge it up 30 spaces or something. It's amazing. It's amazing. I mean, it feels like you're being really fickle when you do that, but you just have to remember that there's no way that you can think about 500 games all at once and be completely objective. You just can't do it. So I've basically got this list and I've put it together as well as I possibly could. And I've actually reached the stage where I'm thinking any finalization I do beyond this point is just me messing around, and I need to stop. I need to actually just get to doing these videos. The problem is that with these is that if I'm going to be talking about the games as I'm going up, and this is another technical thing with the actual videos themselves, is that starting from the bottom and working up, there's going to be certain things about certain games I'm going to want to talk about, but it's going to be hard to say things in the list whilst not spoiling things from later on in the list. Like I won't like say if there's a series that I like and one of them is at number 10 and another one's at number 100 or something, I don't know, whatever. I'm just making this up by the way. And then I get to the number 100 and I'm wanting to tell you the story about how it connects and how I relate to the game that's at number 10 because they're in the same series. I'm going to have to sort of put that off. So even if there's a game where I have a lot to say about it, sometimes I may not say everything I want to say because of where it is in the list, and that's a really hard thing to do. Also, I am recording this video here. I am recording this before recording the videos where I talk about all of the games in the list. So this I'm making this first. So this is going to take a long time. The date today is the 15th of March 2016. So any game that I've played beyond today, it won't be included in the list, even if I love it. If I play a new game tomorrow and it's my favorite game of all time, or I really, really, really enjoy it, and I want to put it onto the list, I can't because it will just mess up what I've got. So just bear in mind that just because I don't mention a game by the time you've seen this, I may have played it before having made this list. So that's something to consider. But I think the big important point that I want everyone to take from this is that don't take this as 100% set in stone because I can't do it. I can't set this 100% set in stone. Just as a note, some of these side notes that I've made, such as the idea of nostalgia and the idea of being hard to justify its position and confidence and experience and clumps and all that. I find this is more so the case the lower down the list that you go. So when we actually get to the higher stages of the list, I'm going to generally be more confident in my ranking. If I'm feeling a bit iffy about my confidence or my experience with the game as I mention it, I will actually mention that whilst I'm talking about it. So hopefully that's everything I have to say. And so from this point on, starting from the next episode, I'm just going to be counting from 500 and gradually up to 1. What I'm hoping to do is to be able to go through the first bunch of games faster, the games earlier on my list faster than I would the ones higher up on the list, which I think is going to naturally happen when you get to the stuff that I'm really, really into. There's going to be a few cases where I'm going to have like maybe a couple lines to say and I can't say anything else about it, and you're just going to have to like take or leave it, I suppose. I'll see you all in the next part where I actually start counting the list. Hi everyone, I've just come back sooner than expected because I feel like I just had to add a little bit of extra audio onto this episode here because I know that there's going to be a few naysayers out there who will say something along the lines of, this is ridiculous, there's no way she's going to talk about 500 games in this series, I can't believe it, you're going to quit halfway through, or something like that. Well, I am coming to you from the future, so to speak. Well, this is actually the past relative to when you're listening to this, but it's the future relative to the other bits of audio that you are listening to around this point. See, the audio that you listened to at the first part of this episode was recorded around March, and this audio here is being recorded in September of 2016. So a few months has passed since that audio and this audio, and I have just come to let you all know that the series will all be coming out because the series is all done. In fact, I have just finished recording the audio for my #1 favourite game of all time. So yes, it is a long way away, but it is definitely coming. And as someone who is coming to you from the future in this regard, I just wanted to add a few little things in regards to the videos themselves because now I can speak to you from hindsight. First thing that I want to say is that I plan to release each episode once a week, so if you are still waiting for the next episode, whatever episode that may be, then just wait a while, it should come soon. If the entire series is out at this point, you can just disregard this bit that I'm talking about here. Next thing I want to mention is that it's taken a lot of time and a lot of work to get this series done, and as I've progressed I have noticed a few different little tricks and different editing techniques and different recording techniques as to make the whole thing easier. So you may notice for a few episodes the audio editing might not be as good. You might hear me say things like and more often, but I later on found more effective ways of editing them out as I made this list. I mean, it's only natural. The more that you do of a thing, the better you get at it. And for me to now go back and re-record those episodes with the skills and stuff that I have learned since then is going to be just ridiculous because once again I might learn even more skills and get even better, and the series will never be released. So I'm just here to let you know that whilst for the first few episodes the audio quality won't be quite as good and you will hear me say things like and every so often, it does get better. I'm just letting you know that right now. Also, as expected, the amount of games per episode does decrease naturally over time. The higher up the list I go, the more stuff I have to say about each individual game, and so that does mean that there is going to be more time dedicated towards the games I like more and less time dedicated to the games I like less, which is only natural. The entire series takes up a total of 84 episodes, including this one, so it's going to take a long time for the whole series to get released. But I do have some bonus episodes planned which I haven't made yet. That's still in the future for me as I'm recording this right now, but we'll see. So yeah, that was just a little message from the future to let you know that the list is done. I will try to get a consistent time scheduled for each upload. I'll try to get an episode uploaded every Wednesday. I'm going to aim for 7 o'clock GMT time on each Wednesday, although you know, you've got to consider how that would affect different people in different time zones, and I don't know how that's going to interact when daylight savings time goes in and out, but we'll see. And hopefully I won't come across any problems in regards to that. But yeah, just to let you know that the series is done and I plan to have it uploaded once a week. And I hope that you enjoy my top 500 games. So I'll see you when we'll talk about my number 500 game in the next episode. So see you next time and enjoy the list.